Oh, hey, I'm glad you're here. The old saying is that the devil is in the details. I think that's true. Recently, my daughter was showing me something on YouTube, and I noticed a pattern. And after she showed me a few, I saw similarities. And so I did a quick Google search. Many people before me have done the same search, asked the same questions. The random edits and the slow zooms that serve no purpose, but to try to trick you to keep listening to their long winded attempts to get advertising money. Nice try, devils. Then I noticed the language for these videos. 10 best, absolutely great, you've never heard of, impossible, and don't get me started on the mouth agape surprised look they have to have that they achieved alone in a room, because it makes me sad. But if it's artistically such a hollow endeavor, then why do so many people do it? Well, money. That's the big detail. The one that rarely powers a lot of things that I love. For instance, artists like Mike Patton, who came up in the last episode with Heather, he could easily just tour playing the same Faith No More album around the globe, nonstop. But he doesn't. He has all these other ways to express himself that may reach tens of people rather than millions. Or Carla Boslich, who also was mentioned in the last episode with Heather. Her projects were never destined really for radio, and yet she has to do music her way. There are so many great artists that just nail something and then move on. No sequels, no endless teat of sameness for the masses to suckle upon. All right, that's a bit much, I'll give you that. But there's only one Neutral Milk Hotel album called In the Aeroplane Over the Sea. There's just one, and that's it. I admire those who do their thing in their lane far more than a band with a certain style that gets exposure and suddenly there's carbon copies of carbon copies. And it's attempts for success, not really art for art's sake, if that makes sense. I'm not saying you won't find things in the wake and the echoes, but it's just different, especially in movies where I tend to like copycats more. You know what I'm talking about, Italian filmmakers. I've mentioned this before, I think on the podcast, but a popular podcaster once accused me in a manner of words of asking them to be on my podcast because they had so many followers. And I would get their followers to listen to my podcast because they know a popular director from the 90s, which is hilarious because that's not really how it works. And I would ask anyone to be on this podcast. If you're listening to this, you're welcome on the podcast. I have people on who aren't even online. And I'm not interested in listens or copying a successful format in hopes for popularity. I've never been popular. You can't even find this podcast unless you spell it right, and good luck because most people don't say it right. But that is just another devilish detail. But that detail is one that matters to me. There's something special to discovery, to a hunt, to when you find something and then you have to dig a little deeper. You need to know more. It's not a Doritos chip designed to not satiate your hunger so you keep chasing that dragon. Not a YouTuber trying to trick you to care long enough so they can get those advertising dollars. Not a radio station which is powered by advertisements anyway. And that's what's at the heart of this episode. That drive for an artist to create just for the art's sake, especially in the musical part of this episode. Plus, we talk about 2 movies of the same name, okay? I've already rambled on too much. I've waxed poetically too long enough with my usual nonsense. So let's just get right into this very devilish delight of an episode. Please enjoy.
Innocence can be hell.
Wait. I almost forgot. In keeping with this devil in the details motif and 2 movies, we only have 1 band, let's add another. So I reached out to Daniel Graves, who has a musical project called Aesthetic Perfection, and they have a song called The Devil's in the Details. Hence the motif at the beginning of the episode. So I asked if we could include it at the end of the episode, and Daniel kindly agreed. So listen to the end for a track off their All Beauty Destroyed album. Okay, that's it. Now back to the episode.
Innocence can be hell. Innocence can be hell. Can be hell.
Greetings and salutations. This is VHS, and I'm your host, Dirk Marshall. We continue this season with me inviting previous guests on to help me cross off another movie from my episode wish list, only this time, something perhaps went amiss, or, as some say, strings behind the veil of our reality are being pulled by powers beyond our comprehension. The only way out is through the dark, and my ethereal co-pilot is Heather Drain, aka Mondo. Heather, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm always thrilled to be a co-pilot in matters of ethereal darkness.
Yes.
So
May have been late when I wrote that. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been good. As always, time weaves its cruel spell upon us all. I just feel like it's just evaporated. But no, I'm doing good. I'm very excited because, as you mentioned, it did go. The planning for this went amiss, but I think in that kind of like beautiful
Yeah.
way where it's like you took a little tiny seed and it's like sprouted off almost like three different buds.
Yes. Yeah. It's an accident that gives gifts instead of trauma, I suppose. Do you have any new projects or any new obsessions currently?
Oh gosh, always.
Yeah.
There's one project, it's a new podcast.
Okay.
It's not public yet, but it is, I will say this much, it is a collaboration with Jason Heath, who's a super cool independent filmmaker, and he also has a great YouTube channel and production company called Barefoot and Independent, and he does a series on his channel called Squeaky Clean Adult Films, where he basically takes adult films. I mean, and we're talking everything from like 1970
Okay.
up into things that are from like the early aughts, and kind of took this comedic concept, but used it in this like subversive way to kind of reveal like how many people, have this like view of like, oh, adult films, the plot. But it's like, no, there's a lot of like any genre. There's interesting filmmaking and directors and writing and
Mhm.
actors. And so he's kind of used this idea of taking these films and making like G-rated, at most PG-rated cuts. And it's interesting because some of the videos are almost like over an hour long because there's a
Wow.
lot of exhibition. Others, like there's one called Cousin Betty from like 1971. That's like, I think it's like like the actual film's like 2
Okay.
minutes,
Yeah.
which is funny. But you get kind of like the whole gamut. So we're working on a little project together. I'm very excited about. And writing wise, I've been doing some essays for some upcoming Blu-ray releases.
Awesome.
That aren't out just yet, but I will take the chance to go ahead and say, plug, of course, if anybody hasn't, I think we mentioned it last episode, the Flesh trilogy
Yeah.
Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
Please, it's Michael Finlay. If you love exploitation, art house, noir, go-go dancers, weird manners of murder, and great black and white cinematography, check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, what about you? Of course, other than doing this amazing show, like what have you been up to?
Well, currently just obsessed with what this episode is going to become. I've also had a couple other interesting things happen just with the podcast. With there was a lot of scheduling things that happened this season, but ended up turning into very sort of interesting turns rather than sometimes you'll schedule or like I've prepped entire episodes and it's just fallen apart. You just go, well, I'll just forget about those 8 hours and move on in some other ways. But this season has been really good, and one thing that happened that it was really exciting is the first time I was invited on the New World Pictures podcast, and they said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "The Great Land of Small," and they were like, "What is that?" And so we recorded the episode. Well, that didn't have a Blu-ray release, but then Canadian International Pictures decided to put the Blu-ray out and asked them if they could put the episode on the disc. So we got to be included in that release. So it's super cool that they even asked me to be on the podcast, and then for that to actually end up on the Blu-ray. That's the first time, not being somebody that's known for historical references of films. It's pretty crazy. I didn't think I would ever be included in something like that. So that was really exciting, and that's available now through Canadian International Pictures.
That's badass. I love that. And I will be nabbing that up basically, other than getting the t-shirt that you're wearing
Yes.
on this episode. I will be nabbing that up. That's wonderful. And that's welcome to the world of physical media.
Yes, I know. It's so exciting. I just keep looking at it and going, wow, I can't believe it. Now, I asked you if you'd return and discuss Devil Doll, and then you mentioned a band called Devil Doll. And then I prepped the wrong movie titled Devil Doll. And so we're rolling all of that into one celebration of all things Devil Doll. And I think we'll start with the band because I had never heard of this band. I had never heard anyone discuss it. It's not even something I came across in any capacity. And so I was curious, where did this start for you?
Oh my gosh. So many great, well, not all great obsessions, but the thing I love about like when you curate your social media, everybody complains, about social media, and everything has its plus and minuses when it comes to humanity in general.
Yes.
But if you curate it, you can, and be like, okay, like what can you discover? My friend Tom on Instagram, who's a great writer, and he writes a lot for Diabolique. But he was working on an article about a band called Devil Doll for this one-off publication that was created by the guys behind Radical Research, the podcast, which I sent you a link.
Yes.
They did a great episode on this band, and Tom kept posting like pictures of who I now know is Mr. Doctor,
Yes.
the basically who is pretty much Devil Doll.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, this is his creation in composition. And I kept being like, who is this guy? Because Mr. Doctor, who I think we now know his real name, or do we? I mean, that's the great thing about when bands are this mysterious.
Yeah.
It's like, there's always that sort of fog, that wispy fog around them.
Well, I think we do know his name now because didn't he also write a couple year sort of compendium of punk releases called like 45
Yes,
Revolutions?
which is hard to find and very
Yes.
expensive. And I have tried.
Me too.
It's easier to get it's easier, as expensive as the albums are, it's easier to get those than
Yes.
his books. But yeah, Mario Pansierra, who looks like he's so striking looking
Yeah.
organically. Like he
Mhm.
looks like a character from a movie that would have this music as a soundtrack. But the more Tom kept posting, and and again, Tom, kind of like us,
Mhm.
when you connect with people online that are like, okay, like this person is tuned in and turned on to some really good art, I had
Yeah.
to look into it. And oh my God, I was hooked. Like it started
Mhm.
with their first album, The Girl Who Is Deaf,
Mhm.
and it was all she wrote. It's, and especially because it's like, this music was recorded from 87 to 97. Oh, and it doesn't sound dated. It
Mm-mm.
doesn't sound like anything else. There's elements that you can kind of be like, okay, here's one part classical music. Here's one part sort of like Bertolt Brecht, like very Brechtian. Here's one part like heavy metal,
Mhm.
here's now this sounds like a circus.
Yes.
And but the way he weaves everything together and creates this like soundscape is, I just think it's breathtaking. And it's absolutely, I think, one of the most enchanting um pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. I adore Devil Doll.
Yeah, I completely agree. I started with the same album and it started and I was like, okay, I know where this is. Nope, I don't know where this is going. And you won't know. And that's one of the most amazing things is the pieces evolve and change. And I was telling a friend, they were like, well, what does it sound like? And I was like, it's kind of like if Ogre wrote a Cirque du Soleil. There's just something about the vocals that he does in some parts. And then, yeah, my friend was just like, I'm listening. And I said, well, you just have to check it out because it's very, like, there's a part where I was like, oh, this is kind of like almost prog rocky. And then it's just like Neubauten. There's just things that happen that I was just like, oh, okay. And I've listened to the album over and over and over. Obviously, I have the shirt on now. And then I started going on to the soundtrack to the movie that I was then messaging you about
Mhm.
to be like, have you seen this movie? Because I just found out there's a movie. And man, it just, the lore of this band. And I wanted to give a shout out one more time to that podcast that you sent me. What are they called?
Radical Research.
Yeah, Radical Research. They did a really excellent episode on Devil Doll. And so people should definitely check that out if you're like, Dirk's just babbling. Well, these people are far more articulate on this subject than I am. But yeah, it's great.
It's a great episode and great podcast. And anybody listening, if you're curious, go to them. They have a small like publishing house that produce, and of course I'm blanking on the actual book, but they haven't done that much, so it'll be easy to find. I
Yeah.
want to say it's the publishing is called Seasons of Hex, but they also put out a biography that's really good on Peter Steele from Typo Negative. So yeah, which of course I love. Of course I'm a Typo Negative fan, right? But yeah, no, Devil Doll. And it's almost like if you when you think of movies, and no wonder like people like us connected with it, and like my
Mhm.
friend Thomas too, like
Mhm.
Thomas Clark, is that we're film people and music people, and
Yeah.
Devil Doll musically is that connectivity because
Yeah.
it's totally, and it's no shock to find out like what I've read about Mario is that he's a huge film fan, and you see film imagery all throughout sort of the album artwork of all the albums,
Mhm.
and particularly with a great love of pre-code horror movies, which we're about to get into
Yeah.
because he took the band name
Yeah.
from the Todd Browning
Yeah.
Devil Doll. But yeah, pre-code horror, German expressionist,
Mhm.
which is both are such a sweet spot for me, especially. But also reading about some of his musical influence, which like he was raised around classical music,
Mhm.
but he also was like a big fan, I'm sure still is, of Peter Hamill from I believe Vandergraaf Generator,
Oh wow, okay.
which is a great band, and
Yeah.
Peter Hamill's solo stuff's really cool, and I rewarding in a very different way. But if anybody isn't familiar with either Vandergraaf Generator or Peter Hamill, definitely check him out and them out. And I feel like you and I are both very much of this cloth where you love music, all kinds of music too,
Mhm.
and it also satisfies that sweet spot. And you don't always find that, especially with people like, oh, people have this stereotype of like, if you love heavy metal, then you're kind of like, oh, like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
kind of like a knuckle dragger. And I mean, that element's there, but that element's in every genre. I mean, you're going to find
Sure.
some very uptight academic types
Mhm.
that are going to be like, well, I only listen to this or I only watch that. And it's like, there are those of us who are just born hungry and we
Mhm.
just want all the cool, interesting art. We're not too particular about categories. We're just like, make it interesting, make it worth our
Yes.
while. And Devil Doll is so I really want the albums to be back in print
Mhm.
so more people could get them physically. Before we recorded, I was telling, if anybody's listening to this, do go to discogs.com and just try to hunker down. Every so often you can get a legit copy on CD at somewhat affordable prices. The vinyl, I mean, unless you want to sell your firstborn,
Yeah.
or if you're a trustafarian or something, like you have that trust fund money. And I'm not hating, trust me. If I
Yeah,
had like
seriously.
random inheritance, I am not above. I would not be above, especially like some of the gatefold vinyl
Mhm.
for Disa Rai. I hope I'm saying that right. For that final album, because it's like lenticular in
Mhm.
parts, and I mean that's the thing. Mario's like he has a visual art background as well, and that shows. Even his handwriting. Like if you look at pictures of his
Yeah.
handwriting,
Yeah.
it looks like art.
Yeah.
Like this man, I mean, he really I would love to what a fascinating character, what little we know about him. And the fact that he has a punk museum. He
Yeah.
founded this punk rock museum in Venice. That looks, if you see pictures of it online, and somebody in the Devil Doll Facebook group, which of course I'm a part
Yeah,
of,
you gotta be.
yeah, somebody shared some videos of it. I think it's one of those things you have to make appointments. Like it's not just open to the public. Yeah, even this guy's museum is not that easy to
Uh-uh.
access. Let's just take a moment.
Yeah,
He makes you work for everything.
and it's just fascinating, like, as an artist, like, like, we had the store Ozone in Portland, and that's the place that would have, like, the punk section, the noise section, stuff that just wasn't in your Sam Goody or whatever record stores that you would find in the mall. And
Mhm.
so I'd go there, and that was like my favorite place to be because they had like numbered stuff from Controlled Bleeding or like Coil
Wow.
7 inches and things. Yeah, like limited edition stuff. Like, and one of the ones I always reference is I think the band was called Bee Queen, but they had a cassette that was in a wooden box filled with bee wings, and like that. That's the kind of thing where I was just like, I need that. Like, it doesn't even matter what it sounds like. I'm gonna get that. And for someone who's always chased down everything Coil, if we end up at some record store and there's a one-sided 10-inch that's like, $80 or something, my wife's just like, get it, because you'll just think about it if you don't get it. And it's just like, and I get it, and I look at it. Someone took a razor and they etched this like poetic little something on the inside of the vinyl. And I love that kind of stuff. And Devil Doll is one of those things where it's like, you can't believe, like, one of the releases he supposedly wrote with his own blood on it. There's the one album he recorded and then kept the only copy of it, and it was never released, although parts of it are said to be on later releases. And it's just like he painted it and put it on the wall and said it's not an album, it's a painting. And it's like this kind of stuff where I'm just like, I love this. I love everything about this. He doesn't care about the ego part of the artistry. It's just like the creation and the making of it, and just that's such my thing.
Oh, I same. Oh God, oh, like once you, and the thing, once you get in this band though, just knowing that there is so much more material that is just like not out there.
Yeah.
Especially like because we do kind of live in an age of oversharing a little bit, you
What?
know, like, and yeah, just a wee bit. But isn't that always the case? The people that overshare are the people that you're like, no, I'm good. I'm
Hmm.
good. I don't need this. I don't need your, to know your face, routine, random influencer ladies. But seriously, I watched the whole thing about the whole digitine thing with the Met Gala,
Oh,
where it's like which I love the fact that we have a coined phrase called the digitine. It's a digital guillotine.
oh wow.
But a lot of but some of the people they were talking about, I'm like, I don't know who these people are. And it's like, oh, they're e-celebs.
Hmm.
And like, no, that's a thing. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but depending on what you're doing.
Hmm.
But it's kind of fascinating to know that there's this artist who is so brilliant. And I mean, that's the thing, like to make the art that Mario Panziera does. Yeah, I mean, this guy's legit. He is the real true blue kind of rare star,
Yeah.
and a true star, like in a celestial sense, not in some sort of shitty
Hmm.
pseudo Warholian like 15 minutes thing, who's just like, no, this isn't, I'm making this for me, and is happy with that.
Yeah.
I find it both frustrating as a lover of his art, but
Yeah.
also as somebody who's creative, I find it like weirdly really admirable, because I always feel like a little toddler with everything I create, where I just like, oh,
Yeah.
look at this thing I made. I get so excited and I want to share it with, with everybody. Boy. And it's funny, we have a Venetian connection to Devil Doll 36.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
I don't
Well,
know if it's connected directly to Mario,
right.
but I mean, I mean, Venice does not seem like that big of a city to
Right.
me,
No, that's a good point.
as far as cities go, at least. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so in this episode, we have a few pieces from Devil Doll, which we'll play, kind of transitions as we move through. And the first one we'll just put in right now as we transition to Devil Doll from 1936.
Welcome, my friend. Here, whole generations of ghosts have raised their eyes and wings each morning to unbounded space. With the innocent joy of chrysalids, greeting their final metamorphosis.
And we're back, and we're ready to talk about Devil Doll 1936. The synopsis is: wrongfully convicted of a robbery and murder, Paul Lavande, Lionel Barrymore, breaks out of prison with a genius scientist who has devised a way to shrink humans. When the scientist dies during the escape, Lavande heads for his lab. That's not actually what happens. Uses the shrinking technology to get even with those who framed him. That's kind of what happens. At the time of this recording, you can stream it, buy the Blu-ray, but I have to encourage you to support your local video store like Movie Madness right here in Portland, Oregon. Was this your introduction to this film, or had you seen this before?
Um, I had actually seen parts of the 36 Devil Doll, and why it took me so long to see it as a cohesive film, I have no idea. I'm a little ashamed because I love Todd Browning. There's so many, I don't know, if you're like me and have like sort of attention, I'm like a crow. Like I like see shiny things and I get so distracted, and there's so many,
Same.
that's maybe the dangers of being kind of an omnivore with
Mm.
culture is you're
Mhm.
like, oh God, I love Todd Browning. Wait, there's a Timothy Carey movie I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, there's a, they're psyched by the 4D witch. I gotta check that out. Just like that. I do love Todd Browning, and I think all of his stuff. I mean, I was actually thinking about this earlier, in prepping for this episode. Like, in some ways, you could argue that his most conventional film was Dracula.
Mhm.
And when somebody's more conventional output is Dracula,
Yes.
you know you're living right. You
Yeah.
know you have done something right in this universe. I adore Todd Browning. I think all of his films have an interesting sort of like
Mhm.
patina. Like it's
Mhm.
very strange and definitely at times very macabre, but very there's almost like a twinkle of weird love.
Yeah.
Like he's got a morality that I like because it's not overtly like this is good and this is bad. It's
Right.
more just like very like this somebody who, you know, and I know it's because he kind of grew up more like working. I mean, he grew up with the carnival, which is a very kind of like scrappy way to have to grow up.
Yeah.
You know, you're definitely not growing up in a very moneyed, prestige, sheltered environment at that point, that you realize kind of like what real morality is, which is just like, okay, what's in someone's heart, you know?
Mhm.
And there's a little bit of that in this film. I have to say, I don't think it's like his greatest, but I loved it.
Yeah, same.
I'm so glad we got to watch this because this wasn't our original pick.
No, this so what happened for me, much like your crow analogy, is I had seen the image of the doll from the devil doll that we'll eventually get to, and I was like, "Oh, okay, we got to talk about this." Then I'd purchased the Blu-ray for this movie, and so I put it on and I'm watching it having not seen it before. Actually, the only Todd Browning that I'd seen was Dracula and Mark of the Vampire. And
Oh,
and mostly, I always think of him just as, I mean, freaks too, but I mostly
oh
only think
God,
of him
yes.
as freaks. Like that's the one that my brain always goes to. And then when I'm reminded that he had a career, I'm like, oh, okay, because I know that that kind of really ended it for a little bit. So the whole time I was watching this movie, I was like, when does he become the doll? Because in my mind, that's what was leading to. And then when it got to the end, I was like, I've got to tell Heather I just watched the wrong movie because this is not that, but let's get to what it is. So, the director is Todd Browning, who did London After Midnight, Freaks, Dracula, and Mark of the Vampire. The film stars Lionel Barrymore from It's a Wonderful Life, You Can Take It With You, and Mark of the Vampire. Maureen O'Sullivan from Tarzan the Ape Man, Hannah and Her Sisters, and Peggy Sue Got Married. She worked a long time. This is pretty awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
when I saw Hannah and Her Sisters on the list, I was like, what? She must have been so I mean, okay. And then Frank Lawton from The Invisible Ray, Cavalcade, and David Copperfield. One of the things that's really interesting is the themes in this film, like the vengeance, the idea of little people, people with disabilities, things that it seems like Todd Browning really kept bringing up and putting into his films. Continues here. It was based on the novel Burn Witch Burn by Abraham Grace Merritt, which is a story of witches and voodoo, and this was altered to be science fiction, which, like, this is my type of science fiction, I guess, where it's just very little science and lots of just weird imagery. The early script was titled Witch from Timbuktu, and there's quite
What?
a, yeah, The Witch from Timbuktu. And there's a huge path from early page to screen, and the Blu-ray features film historians Dr. Bruce Haberman and film historian filmmaker Konstantin Nasser, who go to great detail about the path. So if you're ever interested in book to screenplay, all the way on to name changes to the screen, it's a fascinating step-by-step in great detail. So I wanted to give them credit for that. Let's press play on Devil Doll. We see it's a Todd Browning production, and it reads Devil Doll across the screen. We see a man in a boat who yells to turn the motor off and shines the light into the trees. They say, get them before they leave the island, so we know that these two men are on a prison break. They reach a shack, and it's Marseille's wife. I think I got the name right there.
Oh, Marcel.
Marcel.
Yes. Oh, his wife.
Yes.
Oh, who's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes. They're safe, but they can't stay there. Marcel is obsessed with his work. So they have these tiny 6-inch dogs they introduce. And at this point in the film, I was like, I'm all in for everything that happens here.
Just as I thought. They're all alike. They might as well not have any brain at all.
What is it? Is this the great work you've been dreaming of so long? Toy dogs?
Toy. Forgive me, LeFond. Have you been locked away from life so long? You don't recognize a prisoner of life itself.
Why, it feels warm. Almost flesh and bone. Like the real animal.
It is. 8 hours ago, it was a full-grown St. Bernard. You think I'm mad. The world would think so, too.
Oh my God. This film goes hard immediately, which I love. There is no, because some films make you wait for the strange. They
Yes.
make you, it's like you have to kind of deal with like sort of the norm, or you get long stretches of. That's my problem with like Murders in the Rue Morgue, like the
Yeah.
32. Like it's like all the stuff with Bela Lugosi's so great, and it's Bela
Yeah.
Lugosi. Bela
Yeah.
Lugosi eating ham and cheese sandwich would be
Yeah.
the best thing ever. But then it's like there's the young lovers, and you're like, oh God, the young lovers are so bland. Like get back to the,
Seriously.
the murdery, wild-eyed, killer,
Mhm.
killer Doctor Man. And killer, that's actually his title is Killer Doctor Man. But this one immediately, but I love the bait and switch that Todd and of course the script, which I noticed one of the writers on the script, if IMDb is to believe, which sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, Eric von Stroheim, which is
Oh, wow.
incredible. I love Eric von Stroheim, who is one of the great early artists, in my opinion, of Hollywood and of cinema, who definitely got kind of the shaft. But that's for a different episode entirely.
Yeah.
But probably more people are familiar now with his work as an actor, particularly in Sunset Boulevard. But he's credited as one of the writers for the special. That was cool. But I love that, like, because you first see the two guys, you see Marcel and Levon.
Yeah.
And Marcel's like, I could do my life's work and make the world a better place, and you're just, you just have hate in your heart. And he's like, vengeance. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so Marcel's the good guy and Levon's our villain. But then very quickly, like that, not even like 2 minutes, you're into this, you're like, Marcel's insane.
Yeah.
Like he is crazy. And his beautiful, we can now get into Melita, his wife. For me, the two MVPs of this entire film cast is Lionel Barrymore, first of all.
Yes.
Holy cannoli.
Yeah.
Like a treasure, an absolute treasure.
Yep.
But right behind him is Raffaella Adiano as Melita, because she's kind of like, it's almost like if, and of course my mind's blanking, the actress that plays Simone in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, who's also in Crawl Space. I cannot remember her name, but she's that great striking, kind of Amazonian built, angular featured. She's beautiful. But like if she and Dr. Pretorius had a baby, it would be Melita.
Yeah.
And there's a love story for the ages right there.
Yes.
He's amazing.
First of all, she's the first on-screen female mad scientist. We have to give her credit for that.
Huge props.
And
Huge props
she
for that.
has the Bride of Frankenstein hair. She's got
the white streak. She's gorgeous. She's totally like early Gothic.
Yeah.
Gothic queen. Not enough people give her credit for that. But here, you heard it from here. Not only are we getting people into the band Devil Doll,
yes,
we are helping all of you baby bats and elder goths give props to Melita.
Yes.
But yes, like, and they're planned. I love his rationale where he's like, if everybody's 1/6 of their size, it'll save all the food.
Yes.
And then,
that's his reasoning. If creatures are 6 inch tall, they need less. So they're going to shrink all of humanity so the world's resources will stretch further. I was like, I was against it, but now kind of makes sense.
I mean, at this point in the game of our civilization, I mean, we've heard way more wackadoo things, but it does have some flaws, to say the least. And especially when it's like, look at this tiny dog that only answers to my will.
Yes.
It's like, well, I don't know if that's really gonna help, man. But
He's like, also, I control everything with my mind. And you're like, oh.
Every living creature reduced to 1/6 its size. 1/6 its physical need. Food for 6 times all of us. Levon, you know that all matter is composed of atoms.
Yes, of course I know.
And all atoms are made of electrons.
Yes, I know.
Well, I've found a way to reduce all atoms in a body simultaneously to any desired degree and still maintain life, as in this little dog.
Well, then the dog should be alive.
It is. Only in reducing the brain, all records are wiped off. no memory left, no will of its own. A creature capable of responding only to the force of another will. Melita, place it on the table.
But Melita, what a devoted spouse. She's waited patiently for 17 years. These
Yep.
guys have been in prison for 17 years in this little amazing swamp shack.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the swamps of Europe.
It's the famous European swamps, yeah.
It's swamp because they're apparently not too far from Paris.
No, right outside.
Those French.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody's going to comment and be like, "Oh, you Philistine! Of course, there's swamps in France." I'm just saying it's not a region people associate with Europe.
No.
You think like Louisiana, you don't really think France.
No.
But she's like doing, like, yes, we will do this work. And poor Lionel Barrymore, poor Levon, who he just wants to avenge. He's an innocent man who's been framed, and he wants to avenge the three guys who framed him for murder.
Yeah.
And then basically took all of his money.
And he has this wonderful scowl when he's Paul in the beginning of the film, and he's not scowling until he's undercover. And then he's like almost radiant in a way. It's like really, really interesting how they do this. So the wife is like, you got to chill out, and yells for some brandy and broth. There's a lady who's a helper who is called a half-wit, which is really unfortunate.
Brandy, you moron. Now some hot broth. Hot broth? What use are you? Go.
Melita, where did you get her?
In a Berlin slum. She's an inbred peasant half-wit. But I wanted no prying wits about me.
Did anyone know she came with you?
No, Marcel. No one knows.
She shows Levon up to his room so he can get some rest, but he can't sleep. So he comes down, and they've already shrunk the lady that was a half-wit, and they're covering her in cotton balls, which no one understands what that's for, but it's just because they couldn't have nudity. So it's their clever way around it. They're like, look, it's still titillating and stuff, but you can't see anything, so they can't make us cut it, basically.
We get cotton ball side boob.
Yes.
What we get with that. You're right. They didn't waste any time. This poor girl who, not only referred to half-wit, but as a product of incest from the slums of Berlin.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's really specific. Was Melita just like hanging out in Berlin in the slums being like, ooh, a half product of incest, you say? Like,
interesting. Looking for a job?
Come on, and who happens to be traditionally really beautiful too? Because like when they glam, I do have some questions, and not to get too nerdy. It doesn't matter because the film's great. But I loved how she has a new wardrobe when she's tiny. She's got this tight striped sweater. Like she looks kind of like a beautiful cigarette girl. Like who'd sell you cigarettes all of a sudden. Her little heels. I mean, I don't know. It was little lipstick.
Yeah.
Like, she got a glam. They glammed her up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she's good at painting those dolls, which are, I guess, people,
I guess.
Yeah. It is interesting. So the lady cradles the tiny woman in her hands and says, use your mind and she'll bend to your will, which is like the first time that I was like, this is not good. This isn't good. I'm against this now. Lionel's like, no, I won't do this. But then they just go to shrink people in Paris because, unfortunately, her husband has a heart attack, and then she convinces him to come with her and use it. They can do this act as his vengeance. So he's like, oh, vengeance? Okay, I'll do vengeance. But I wasn't going to shrink people until you said vengeance. So off they go to Paris. In Paris, we see a newspaper wanting Paul Levant. So we understand that he's now on, they're still looking for him. They offer $50,000. They offer $100,000. We see an angry old woman tear down one of the posters, and it's Paul Levant. He's now dressed as an old lady for the rest of the film, pretty much.
I love this
so great.
Much. This is my Tootsie.
Yes, same.
I'm not a big fan of the Dustin Hoffman Tootsie. No offense, I know a lot of people love it. It's not my flavor. This is my Tootsie.
Yeah.
Lionel Barrymore is amazing because most of the time in Hollywood, if they have actors do drag, it's first of all, it's usually it's older films that can be a little problematic,
yes.
but it's also like kind of sad drag where it's like, am I supposed to believe that people think that this guy that looks like Ed Asner in a wig thinks this is you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it takes a lot of some suspension of disbelief. Lionel Barrymore legit kind of looks and sounds like an old lady.
It works. Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, this is my favorite. I mean, Lionel Barrymore is a great actor, but this is like my favorite role
Yeah, because
of
it's
his.
not grating, it's not played up in any way. It's just almost understated in a weird sense. But yeah, the nuances that he has for the character. He goes in drag to get money from the bank with a tiny horse that then becomes a real horse, but it's tiny and it runs around listening to his orders.
Walk around. Faster. Faster. That's amazing. It didn't move like a mechanical toy.
It's a cool effect. I actually love all the effects in this movie. It's all
Mhm.
very sort of surreal and yet really impressive because they built enormous sets for sequences where they have the actors climbing and stuff, and we'll get to that. But I did not expect that. And so the way that they mixed these two things in the film, I was really, really impressed. Also, they gave Todd Browning a lot more money than I thought for something like this. It's pretty incredible. So he wows the banker. The banker says he'll come over to the toy shop at 8 o'clock. So he sits down, tries to get him to drink the cognac. He's not going to take it, hands him a dog. Melita brings her tiny poison knife and he stabs her with it and stabs him with it. And he's dead, right?
It paralyzes him,
Right.
and then they shrink him.
That's right. Yes.
But it's interesting because when they shrink him, I've noticed, I guess because it's the whole thing of it shrinks their mind. And that's the one thing Marcel was wanting to try and perfect before he died, was where they could keep their mind at a full scale, to just be physically tiny. But yeah, the little tiny stiletto made me think of,
Oh, so good.
I have a little action figure of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Mhm.
And she has that little knife in her belt. It looks like that.
Yeah.
It made me think like
I
the
just-
little tiny Elvira stiletto. I love it.
I love that the knife had to be small, like to be involved. Like it couldn't be a regular size anything. They're like, it'll be a tiny knife, and then we'll make them tiny. It's just such a genius thing. There's a beautiful moment in this scene too where her voice changes back to Paul's as he talks about his hatred of this person once he's like, frozen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and Lionel Barrymore pulls that off beautifully.
Yeah.
And the thing too is like there is so much like moral shades of gray with his character that he pulls off, I just think, so expertly. Because there's times where he is legit kind of sinister
Mhm.
and intense, but then there are other times where you do have a lot of empathy for him, and he seems to have at least some. I mean, obviously, he's not above employing this use of sort of magical science, I guess,
Yes.
for a means to his own end, but he seems to have a little more empathy than, say, Melita or Marcel did, where like at one point, Melita's having like her former assistant, who's now a little lady, and Radine, is it Radine? Like that's the
Yeah.
first victim
I think so, yeah.
of doing this great dance.
Yeah.
And it's cute, and she's got the music box, but then like the girl ends up sliding off the table, like, and he's immediately rushing, being like, "You idiot, she could be broken in half." You realize, wow, like Melita and even Marcel, as well intentioned as they are, just lost the plot.
Yeah.
Controlling living things, that's not good. That's obviously not good. It's exploitation. You've lost all matter of like goodwill with that, where he at least has enough sense of basic human empathy to be like, this is a living person. This is a living creature. Like, maybe let's not, have her break her tiny little spine when she falls. Now, granted, did that also stop him from having her scale giant things to steal jewelry?
No.
And then
because that's the next part that I wanted to talk about. We're introduced to the taxi cab guy for his daughter. He visits his daughter, and she says, "That old woman is so pathetic and kind. She makes me want to cry." And I was like, oh, that's a weird thing going on.
Yes. She's somehow pathetic and kind. She almost makes me want to cry.
No. I feel just the opposite from that right now.
So we have those characters. We have his daughter. She hates him. We get that. She likes this taxi cab guy. That's wonderful. But then we get this amazing sequence. It's one of my favorite parts in the film where, as the old woman, he gives the doll to the daughter of one of the people he wants vengeance on. and she's sleeping with the doll under her arm, and the doll wakes up and crawls out from under her arm and down the side of her crib, which I was like, she's probably too old to be in that crib. I don't know. But and then it's a mixture of these like giant props and this like superimposed image. It's just it's really cool. The tiny lady goes and gets a high heel and pushes it up against a smaller like footrest or something, climbs the shoe to get onto that, then climbs onto this bench, and then climbs up this like armoire and opens up this giant trunk to her, which is just a jewelry box, and starts taking jewelry out and dropping it down to Paul. I love this whole sequence. It's so cool.
It's beautifully
Yeah.
done. I love, and everything you said earlier about the special effects, I agree 100%. They're impressive.
Yes.
To me, it's still very impressive. Those giant sets the details gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like this is some craftsmanship. And you're right, because there are times where it's such a surreal
Yes.
like image, especially like that first shot of her curled up with the little girl
Uh-huh.
and waking up, and the way that was done was so neat. And I feel like sometimes like with modern cinema, there's almost a little bit of a loss of magic.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
And I'm not one of those people that, oh, there's no good. Of course, there's always great new art with everything. But this is something I would love to like more and more to see more, like especially young filmmakers like study these old films. Like let's go back to practical and get that sense of wonder, because there is that. I think Todd Browning in general always had a sense of wonder.
Yeah.
With a lot of his projects.
I agree.
Those sets are just stunning.
Yeah.
I loved that so much. And just how like kind of brutal. Like, I mean, it's like early 30s brutal, but like especially that first one where he like stabs Radine in the leg, like the force of that. I was like, oof, like it kind of took me back, but I love that. I'm like, oh God, this is so impactful.
Yeah, the thing about computer generated effect stuff now is like the easiest way to do it is there's the big green screen and the person climbs up the thing and then they just composite all of the dresser and everything. But it doesn't look like we know I think our brains know that it's not real. And so it doesn't, like my brain just goes, I don't care. It could be the universe exploding on screen. If it's all CG, I'm just like, I don't know why we're here. But in this, the second she starts climbing, I was like, wait, I don't see the little wavy lines around her body. Like she's really climbing on. They built a giant bed. They built this giant dresser thing that's very detailed, and she scales it, and that's so cool for the actor, but also to get to see as an audience member in the film. So I think today, if you were to do that, I mean, if you can spend the money, it would be like, do you know the artist Ron Mueck? Muek?
I don't know if I do.
So he does. It was called life casting. And so if you look him up, there's amazing stuff where he did like tiny little old ladies, but they're as detailed as like living people. So when you look at him, you're like, whoa. But he also did like giant bodies like in a bed, where we saw his show in New York where you walk in and it messed with your brain because it looks like a real person, but the size of them is so enormous that you react, like your body reacts to the seeing of the sight of this art. Or there's a giant naked man halfway standing up out of a chair, and the fact that he's perched in such a strange way, it's just unsettling, and it's just like it's just so weird. And the hair is real, the eyes look real, the skin looks real. So if you had like a giant arm out of whatever he's made those bodies out of and a person underneath that, I think as an audience member we would be so like what, how are you doing this, rather than like it would just be like the BFG or something, where we just go oof, this is not what I wanted. But
I love I'll look him up, because
really cool.
I love when artists can kind of do almost like, I guess you could call it a type of body horror. That's why I love Screaming Mad George and his stuff so far, because he's always been, and like you can go on YouTube and see like some of his recent art exhibits, like because he's still very much active in the art world, and just seeing the surreal approach to the physical form is so, I don't know, it does take you aback. It does give you a visceral feel, but it's also like sort of like bizarrely enchanting.
Yes.
Like
Yeah, you can't stop looking at it. In the exhibit we saw, he had done a baby that was the size of like a VW bus. And like you walked in and the way it's laying there and everything, and you can see the skin, and it's just like it's very unsettling, but in a way that you're just drawn to. It's
Mhm.
It's fascinating work. But so now I went on a detour with Ron Muick. Perfect. Sadly, he didn't have any work called Devil Doll, but
Not yet.
we still got it in there. So then there's some jewels that they're hunting after. Oh, there's an interesting sequence here where in Dressed as the Old Woman, he goes to where two guys are having lunch and bumps the table but drops a note, and then the note is like encrypted stuff from the Bible.
Oh my God. That was I will say I had two reactions to that. One, gave me some slight PTSD of like when I was in college and I was at a grocery store at 1 a.m. I'll make this a very short detour.
Okay,
This
interesting.
creepy guy handed a wadded up note to like one of the cashiers, and she comes up to me, she's like, "This guy said you dropped this." And I'm like, "I didn't drop anything." And she's like, So I handed it, and it was this note where he had written, he's like, "Hey, I think you look really hot. I run a Subway." I'm not joking. He's
Like the restaurant.
The restaurant. I manage a Subway. If you want to come, like he gave this like time and address, and it was weird. It was awkward, and needless to say, I didn't go to that Subway.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
No.
Was it a
and I'm here to
coupon
tell-
or just a piece of paper he'd written
It
on?
was like a torn piece of note. It was like a torn piece of paper. Like he wrote us a note. It was weird. My second reaction though was the brilliance of making this, this guy who was wrong to him work hard. Like this guy's pouring through an old Bible trying to decipher, and it's basically like confess your sins. So beautifully done.
He wrote the night this night 10th hour thou shalt likewise enter the shadow of death, confess and be saved. And then that guy just scribbled out the confess part and was like, "Call the police."
I love that. Also, does that not sound like that is like a devil? There's got to be a Devil Doll song.
Oh yeah, that's probably written in blood on one of the vinyl. Probably is what it says.
It's like $2,000 on Discogs.
Yeah.
That was such a welcome reprieve because the daughter stuff I know is necessary for the story.
Mm-hmm.
And Marina Sullivan's fine. Like she's fine.
Sure.
But her character, I felt like there's that type of like female character that you see a lot in this time period that's like, like, "Oh, I hate him." Like, and they talk like that.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, I can't stand him." And it's just like this melodrama flatness.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like they didn't always give a lot of especially the women, a lot to work with. And I don't think it helps that the only other really female character we get that's a proper character is Melita, who's just like riveting.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, she's insane, but she loves, like, even though her husband's gone, she is so devoted to, she's like, "We promised Marcel."
Mm-hmm.
And so her stuff, though, I did like her love interest, Toto. Other than his name being Toto.
Yeah. The cab driver.
Yeah. He's like, I thought he was actually kind of like a really nice.
He's an entrepreneur.
He's a really nice character.
Yeah.
How I felt about things, and that you shouldn't waste your time on me.
Oh, it's grand to be up here when your thoughts are all jumbled. Don't things look different? Everything seems so small and unimportant from up here.
But I don't live up here. I live down there.
Our world's what we make it, Lorraine. You know, you're not making the best of yours.
I make it as I see it.
Yes, I know. But you're too sensitive.
It hasn't been pleasant, Toto, to be pointed at, singled out, despised as the daughter of a... It does something to you when you're very young. Something that grows up with you. It got so that I hated to go to school, hated even to leave the house.
Yes. Kids can be pretty brutal, can't they?
And now since the escape, it started all over again. Pictures in the paper, our movements watched. People whispering.
Oh, don't let that get you, darling. You're above all that.
Do you wonder that I hate him?
Don't hate Lorraine.
Oh, not for what he's done to me, but to my mother. The mental torture, the poverty he brought her. Toto, I think I should tell you the truth. My mother didn't just die. She killed herself.
Yes, I know.
And even that doesn't make any difference.
Nothing could make any difference.
I think a lot of that actor though kind of imbued some nice kind of earthiness to it.
Mhm.
But it was just like he's like, the world's what we make it, you
Yeah.
know, and just giving her like really good advice, and she's like, no, I hate my father, you know, and
That's all I
but
talk about. My character is just nonstop. You know who I hate? My dad.
yeah, it's like I would, if I was her, I'd be hating my shitty job a
Mhm.
little more with
I
that
thought the-
mean lady.
I thought the old lady was going to kill her boss. That's what I thought was going to happen. I thought Paul was going to be like, she sucks. I'm going to murder her. But he's so just, these are the people I will have vengeance on and nothing else. Like, Melita would have been stoked if he just shrunk people all the time.
Oh, she would have been down. She
Yeah.
would have been like, oh, goody.
Yeah.
The film could have been longer and just had more of that, more Melita.
Yeah. Give me part
and
two.
it'd be truly anti-capitalist. I'm
Right.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but you
No.
know, the villains are bankers, are evil
Yeah.
bankers. Guys, this movie is the film we've been needing. This is
Yes.
anti 1%.
Exactly. The next sequence we have to talk about is the Christmas tree. It's another part where he has shrunk someone down and they're hung on a Christmas tree and they climb down off of it and then go up the longest flight of stairs for someone that's 6 inches tall to try to kill this last man. But before the clock strikes 10, he confesses. But it's a fantastic sequence where the guy's like sees someone and he's hiding on the stairs. And, you know, this is one where they obviously didn't build the giant stairs so you can see the effect a little bit more. But it's still a very fun sequence, especially when you see someone wake up on the Christmas tree. I was like, yes, I love it.
That was wonderful, especially because he almost looked like he was in a slightly like crucified
Yeah.
house
It's
where he's like,
weird.
my first thought is like, is he the angel? Is he the angel on the
Mhm.
tree? Like, now the tension, especially with the clock, just everything was handled so expertly. That's the thing is this film, kind of another, like, one of the many benefits of exploring older cinema in this era is typically films were pretty short.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, you know, instead of watching like almost 3-hour film directed by Michael Bay,
Yeah.
you could watch this nice little compact gem
Mhm.
and see Lionel Barrymore playing this convict with, that's the thing, he's like chaotically good.
Yes. Yeah.
Like he's not necessarily a bad person, but he's, you know, his morality is definitely and he knows that. Like by
Yeah.
the time we get, even after his name's been cleared, he knows, like, he's like, I'm kind of like damaged goods. He just wanted to clear his name for his family, for his daughter.
Well, in a couple of the drafts, he commits suicide at the end. And then, of course, being the time when this was made, suicide is not something that you're allowed to just throw up on the screen all willy-nilly. And so he talks about how once he clears his name, then that's it. That's the whole plan. He's going to go off. They'll never see him again. That's how he words it. But, like, that's basically it. He's going to shuffle off this mortal coil at the end of this film because the idea is that his daughter can now not live in the shame that her dad was this person that did this terrible thing 17 years ago or whatever. Like, that's his whole thing, is that, like, she's free to love and laugh, and she can be with this man that has at least 3 cabs now. And so, like, what a crazy ending to this thing where we're, like, kind of rooting for this person to exact their vengeance. And then at the end, they're just like, that's all she wrote. I'm going to go die. Like, imagine if John Wick ended that way. Like, people would be like, oh my God, what?
I love it. See, that's the thing I love so much about the pre-code era, especially, is like, I think you did see films that were, you know, a lot more open to kind of having some themes that were definitely a little darker, a little more shadowy. And yeah, I mean, he literally tells Melita, like, you know, I'm not afraid of death.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, yeah,
Whoa,
and
okay.
just like, and he means it. You can
Yeah.
tell he means it. You're like, holy shit, like, this is.
And he doesn't even say, like, I'm the dad. He pretends to be Marcel. And so, like, it's just such an interesting ending to the film. I don't feel like it's, you know, for something that had 6 writers and numerous drafts, I feel like it ends in a place that's not in like a crowd servicey way like today, where they'd be like, but we need a little cute button on it. And instead, it's just like, it doesn't give you that sweet moment where he holds her hand and she goes, Daddy, I love you. He's just like, you're great. He wanted you to be happy. I'm going to go die. Like, it's just like, okay. Damn. All right.
I mean, it's almost like a weird, like, you could kind of do like a weird side-by-side comparison of that final scene with like that great sort of ending of Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh,
with
wow.
Rutger Hauer.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah,
That's brilliant.
Time to Die. That's like the same. Oh, and that would be a great double feature.
That's
Like
true. I mean,
two great films. You know.
I've been so into all things Devil Doll lately that I would pair these with really anything. I love all three of the things that we're discussing in this episode that are Devil Doll related. You know, that's the end of this Devil Doll. Any final thoughts before we move on?
Everybody should see it and love and definitely support physical media and support the great legacy of Todd Browning.
Yes.
And great practical effects. God, this film looks so good.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because we're about to go into a film that has practical effects of a different kind of variety.
Yes.
But I think is interesting. I'm excited. These
Yeah.
are both I feel like this whole episode is just kind of a great surprise of rewards.
Yeah. Oh, good. Me too. Me too. And to help us transition to the next film, a little music from Devil Doll. We're back, and our next Devil Doll is Devil Doll from 1964. The synopsis is a ventriloquist, Bryant Halliday, hypnotizes a newsman's, William Sylvester, girlfriend, Yvonne Romaine, to put her soul in a dummy, Hugo. That's not what happens in this movie. The dummy is named Hugo, but the way that was written was like, then she's going to be the dummy Hugo. But that's not what happens, everybody.
But, well, I think the Great Valeri, I think they had angles, though,
Yes,
for that. So I
that's
think
true.
you're just sort of, this film, if you watch the trailer,
Yeah.
the trailer is so misleading.
Yes.
Because he really, and actually, that's the other thing about both Devil Dolls, is that the real villain is not the dolls.
Mhm.
Well, especially the 36 one.
Yeah.
But I love that the villains are these bankers. I'm sorry, I can't get over that.
Yeah.
I was like, yes,
Yes,
it's
get
the money
'em.
thing. But yeah, no, oh God, I can't wait for us to go into Hugo.
Yes. Yeah. So the whole reason this episode's even happening is I saw an image of Hugo. I was trying to have a ventriloquist on the episode, probably the first or second season of the podcast, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And I came across this image, and so the movie was just on my list. Like, I gotta watch this. I gotta watch this. Magic is another movie with ventriloquism that I was like, well, that
yes.
one, I can convince more people to watch that. Sometimes for those episodes where it's profession based, if I reach out to someone I don't know, the less hurdles, the better. And so Magic was kind of easier to come across and convince someone to watch, but the episode never made it to fruition. So that just the stark image of Hugo was really all it took for me to be like, I have to know more about this. But this film, it's directed by Lindsay Shonteff, who did Voodoo Blood Death, Big Zapper, Harry and the Hookers, Lipstick and Blood. The last film was in 2009, which if you can believe that. So long career, starring Bryant Halliday from Tower of Evil, Projected Man, and Voodoo Blood Death. Also, as you mentioned, co-founder of Janus Films.
Yes. So, in addition to the great Mario Panziera, we found in our research another incredibly fascinating human here in the form of Bryant Halliday, who I found out earlier today actually was originally, when he was young, he was going to be a priest. He was studying to go into the priesthood, and at age 21 changed his mind and went into acting and did a lot of theater, theatrical acting, particularly in Massachusetts and Cambridge, but also co-founded Janus Films, like person that basically anybody listening, like, what's Janus Films? Janus Films, and in essence, basically Bryant Halliday here helped import in the 50s the Seventh Seal.
It's so crazy.
And La Strada, like basically art house cinema being established and being influential in America in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And Janus's Films as an entity is still very much around.
Yeah.
But basically, like, yeah, I mean, we have Bryant Halliday to thank for that. And think about all the like American filmmakers of the 70s that were influenced by going to art houses, particularly in New York, in that time period. And basically, he was so successful doing Janice films that him acting a Devil Doll and a handful of other films, that was for funsies.
Yeah.
Like he was independently at that point, independently wealthy, and just like was like, oh, what a treat. Like, yeah, I imagine, I like to think that's what he said, but he is great. I
Yes.
kept being like, I was almost, obviously I'm not sad, thank God for Janice films, but as a film lover, but right, I wish Brian Halliday would have done more films. He
Same.
is amazing in this. He
Yeah.
is so perfect as Valeri.
Yes, agreed. We also have William Sylvester from Gorgo, Riding with the Devil, 2001 Space Odyssey, Yvonne Romaine from Night Creatures, Quarter of Blood, and Double Trouble, and Alan Gifford from 2001 Space Odyssey, Phase 4, and Dark of the Sun. Pretty great cast. Hugo the Dummy is played by Sadie Core, who was 4'2", played an Ewok in Return of the Jedi, was in Rocky Horror Picture Show, Dark Crystal, Willow, Brazil, and Derek Jarman's Caravaggio, which I was like, what?
That's beautiful. You told me that, and I was like, that is beautiful. Also, it just hit me which Transylvanian she is.
Yeah, right?
Oh my God. Anybody who's a Rocky Horror Picture Show fan, you immediately know who this wonderful, amazing woman God, what a great podcast. We've linked to Todd Browning, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Derek Jarman.
Yes. And Devil
Beautiful. And yes, what a beautiful world.
Look at that.
Holy shit.
Originally, this was to be directed by Sidney J. Fury from Superman 4, Iron Eagle, Ladybugs, and The Entity, but he was unable and tapped his friend Sean Teff to direct. So we'll press play on Devil Doll from 1964. We start with intense music and we see the great Valeri in a car. We get a little title card just as we see the dummy Hugo. And then they pause outside to admire a poster of their sold-out performance, which I was like, nice. I like this. Then we're in the room with the assistant, and he and Hugo are obscured by a cage. And it's the cage that Hugo gets put in, but it's so interesting the way that this shot is set up. We see her clearly, and they step into, and they're both in this cage together visually. And I was just like, well, that's not an accident. That's really well sort of telling the story about these two intertwined in this dance that they have to go through. Varelli puts Hugo. Is it Varelli?
Yeah, because that's how they say Valeri. Well, now I'm gonna
right.
Now that you mentioned, I'm like, my mouth is like, what? Valeri.
Valeri.
But
okay.
I feel like that's how at least Mark William Sylvester's character said it. Who also, I realize I've always called him the Nick Eastman of Gorgo.
Yes.
he's like proto Nick Eastman.
Yes.
But yes, now the composition throughout this film, actually, I'm so glad you brought that. There is some really beautifully arranged shots and scenes in this film that I love. And also just, I'll let you continue, but like there's in this scene, there's a line of dialogue that I love.
Here it is. He puts Hugo into the cage and says, "You'll never win. You'll always lose." And then he turns to her and says, "And you sympathize."
You'll never win. You'll always lose. And you sympathize.
Was it either of those? Because I was just like, whoa, they're right into it here.
I cannot, the level of hatred he has for this doll it's riveting, and it's kind of hilarious because it's so like bonkers.
Yes.
And even when you find out more of the story, it still just is like, why are you so tense? Like,
yeah, Valeri doesn't chill.
He is the opposite of chill. Yeah. I love that Magda, his assistant, though, she's kind of like a sort of like blousier Diana Dors, kind of. She's gorgeous, very curvy, very, very cheeky. That outfit.
yes.
I was like, man, this is 64, and she's already just being like, I know what you're coming here for.
Yeah.
Dummy hate and these buns.
Yeah.
Like...
I didn't know how far this movie was going to go with things either. And maybe it's because I was first watching a movie from 1938, but I was really shocked by some of the things that they show us in this movie. Yeah, I was very pleased. I was constantly caught off guard. We see Mark the journalist. He's bummed to be covering Valeri, and he invites Marianne to the theater. And then we see Valeri on stage suggesting to a man that he's going to die in a sequence that is so bleak. and then the audience starts clapping, and I was like, boy, entertainment in the 60s was wild.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to suggest to this man that his life is in danger, that he may die at any moment. Mr. Harrison, look into my eyes. Mr. Harrison, you told me that in China you once saw a man executed in the streets. I want you to imagine that you are in his place, that you are on your knees. On your knees.
Thank you. That is one of there's so many things I found that gave me so much food for thought in this movie. But one of the biggest ones was how successful and popular Valeri as an entertainer is, because it's like, that's our introduction as the audience, like of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's weird because he's almost whispering to this man too. It's not like he's like projecting. He's like, he's sweating a little bit.
Yeah.
He means it. He is fucking up this guy for real mentally. And the audience is just like, they're clapping. And then it's like, then he's like having basically a verbal abuse session with this doll on stage.
And the movie does something in the sequence where it just wins me over. And what it does is, when he's going to convince this man that he's going to die basically in front of the audience, it's a close-up of Valeri's face, and it switches to negative image. And it's him talking to the guy. So I guess we're seeing what the guy would see if he was looking at Valeri. Like, it's such an interesting choice. And then it's almost like music concrete is like the soundscape for this. There's just like these percussive sort of, I love it. I was like, I would watch 2 hours of just this, but it's cool.
Oh my God. You nailed that. I actually have in my notes, the audio design throughout this film is so good and so interesting, because there are points where it's almost like white noise. Like it's like a low hum that just kind of not obviously there's something gentle about it, but there's almost like a throbbing hum to it and I love it so much when filmmakers do that, because it's like nobody can relax to that. It's such a smart way to keep you tense without being just like super obvious about it. Like, you're being very like, and I mean, that's the thing, this film, I'm glad we're covering this and giving it to proper due, because I feel like and it's not to rag on Mystery Science Theater, but they did an episode, and
I'm not surprised.
But there's a belief, or I think a lot of people that are like, oh, if the movie was on this show, that's obviously terrible, without giving that film a full chance. Now, that's not the show's fault. That's people just being lazy viewers. Don't be that person. If you're listening to us, you probably aren't. But but this film has some really great production in it. Like, especially for being like an obviously kind of a little more lower budget affair, it's got some really cool sort of workmanship about it. A craftsmanship.
No, I completely agree. And I think what you're saying about the music or the soundtrack for it is so true, because I think it holds you in that moment, because it's just that tension that can't leave your body, and so you're just like, what is he doing to this person in this moment? I did write, after everyone claps, everyone's into this? Like, this is like, they went to the show and they're like, I hope a grown man cries and thinks he's gonna die. That's what I want from the show. Okay, great, we got it. It's incredible. So then he convinces Mark makes Marianne, as a bully, Mark's kind of a jerk, get up on stage, and then she's convinced to dance. And so she dances, I'm guessing, the twist?
In a few moments, you'll be hearing some music. When the music begins, you will become a dancer.
Okay, that was my other favorite thing, is where you know, because he's setting up to be like, did you do ballet?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I love like his like tone.
Yes.
How would you just, I don't even know how to describe it. This is very like rich baritone of Valeri. Even his cheekbones are like beautiful and
Yeah.
villainous.
Uh-huh.
Like he is so, it's like, you imagine like Peter Murphy nowadays playing him?
Oh, perfect.
Would that not? Oh my God.
Yeah.
If somebody, I'm not a fan of remakes, but somebody make a film inspired by this with practical effects and Peter Murphy. Make this happen.
Yes.
We implore you. But
soundtrack by Devil Doll.
Yeah, oh my God. Okay. Now I've just got the papers.
Right.
But you know, he's like, and she's like, oh, you know, just a few lessons. So you're thinking like, okay, she's gonna do ballet. She's gonna like do this beautiful dance. And instead she's just frugging and twisted with some hodad. And he's like, oh, I never knew you were such a great dancer. Listen, I'm not saying I'm a great dancer. I'm a terrible dancer. I like part of the reason I like heavy metal. I can dance to heavy metal.
Yeah, there we
I
go.
can headbang, you know, I can pogo. The twist is popular because it's not hard.
Sure.
Anybody can do it. It's just literally one of the easiest dances in the world. So I love that. And even Mark's like, I didn't know you were such a great dancer.
I just love, if you watch the sequence again, there's a guy who I'm guessing Valeri has hired, whose only job is when Valeri says that he's going to make her dance, he walks very determined to the center of the stage, does the twist with her. The second that song ends, he walks directly off that stage. And I'm like, what's his story? Who is that guy? Is he just the twist guy for Valeri? Like, it's so I got so much joy out of just his determination of walking on and off the stage. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, you're right. Then Mark says, I didn't know you could dance. It's really interesting, the whole sequence. But before they leave, Hugo is brought on stage, and Hugo wants to have some wine.
Give me some wine. I want some wine.
Dummy, drinking wine. Don't be ridiculous.
I want some. Give it to me. I know what wine is. I've had wine before. I want some wine. Why shouldn't I have some wine?
You are a dummy, Hugo.
Hugo then says that they're applauding for him, and Valeri says, walk to the end of the stage and say thank you. And so Hugo does, and we see it from behind. It's an interesting thing that we see. There's something, for some reason, more creepy to see the slit in his back where the Valeri's hand would go, and he like stands up and slowly shuffles. And the physicality of the doll is actually really interesting, what Sadie's doing with this character, because it's not super fast or agile. It's very much like something is trapped inside. And I think that's deliberate. And like you're talking about for MTSK or whatever, it's easy to make fun of old things, but I think a lot of care went into this work, just like Peter Weller talking about the movements of RoboCop. It's like these actors kind of sell this on the choices that they're making, and I think Sadie's performance is worth, acknowledging.
Oh, 100%. And the thing too is that I love the choice of having a human person be that, and because it's off-putting. It's
really,
actually, I think in some ways it's much more sort of unsettling than having like
a
this
puppet.
higher budget movie with this expensive sort of like robot, or I guess now it'd totally be CGI. But because there's something, it's the sense of also it's tangible and you can touch it. And you're right, because your human brain, my problem even with really really well done CGI is I'm like, oh cool, is this a game?
Yeah exactly.
I associate it with gaming, not with necessarily storytelling. But but with something tangible and it's just human. It's like, I think why people find mannequins really creepy, because they look humanoid, but like there's something not right. And I actually think that's actually more effective in horror. Like it's hard for me to explain, but it's like there's like gore in some of Herschel Gordon Lewis movies that kind of grosses me out more than really well done gore that looks more realistic. Because if it looks so realistic, it's like, I don't know what it is. There's something about it where it looks so fake, but it's still gross, that it makes it more gross. It makes it more impactful because it's like, it's kind of like messing with your neurons a little bit as an animal. And I feel like the way she moves, I love it. I love that you're praising her performance, because you're right. And that's a thankless, like her role in this is thankless, because I mean, we don't see her face.
No,
it's
never.
just, but it is great, and it is weird.
Yeah,
It's so strange.
I'll give you a brief detour here. When my daughter was 2.5 or so, her grandparents passed a garage sale, and my daughter was a child, so she wants everything. So she grabbed this dirty old doll, and my parents were like, "Well, she really wants it, so she can have it." So my daughter came home with a doll that was as tall as she is, dirty, old doll, and she called her Big Girl, and she could only carry her by holding her up by her throat with both hands because the doll was so big. And it was so unnerving having this doll the same size as her in the house, because you'd pass by the door and it would just be like in the room leaned up against the wall, and you'd just be like, "Oh God, Big Girl." And it had no clothes, and so it was just this dirty, yeah, it was very disturbing. And then the voice my daughter gave it, which she would go, "Big Girl wants some food," and you were
Oh my
like,
God.
and we'd be like, "Why is it talking like that? Like, why is that its voice?" But she was like 2, so she's just like, "That's Big Girl," and you're like, "Oh my God." So we had it for a while, and then we were moving, and so we put it out on the street behind the house, and we just waited for someone to take it. And for like 4 nights, Big Girl just lived in a box out there by a fire hydrant. And I told my friend, and he drove to our house to try to get it because he wanted to put it behind our house where we live now, just in the woods. And but somebody had picked it up. But Big Girl haunts our dreams. I'll send you a picture of Big Girl. Speaking of unnerving dolls, I just had to share the story of Big Girl and its demonic voice that my daughter still doesn't know why she talked like that.
I am fascinated
Yeah.
by this. Oh my God. Especially like her looking like it sounds like what I'm picturing like an SVU doll. Like it's a special victims unit
Yeah.
doll, which we've all seen
Kind
at
of
garage
like that.
sales.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow, that is amazing.
The voice was my favorite part because as someone that loves scary things, like the second she was like, "Big Girl wants food," I was like, "Oh my God, what?" So good.
I love that so much. Oh my
Yeah.
God. We should dedicate this episode to Big Girl.
Oh, okay. I'll use that as one of the art for the episode. I have one picture and it's just terrifying. Back in the film, Valerie and Hugo are invited to go to a charity party, and he wants to sort of get closer to this Marianne character. We're moving along rather fast through this one since we had 2 films. They go to the party and they perform, and there's a whole sequence where Valerie is like, "I'm going to get some ham." And then Hugo is like, "I want to eat. I want food." And he's like, "Then get up and get it yourself."
Ah, ham. I love it.
You cannibal.
Well, what would you have to eat, Hugo, to make you a cannibal? Sawdust.
Don't I get anything to eat? I'm hungry.
Whoever heard of a ventriloquist dummy eating?
I can eat. I can eat like you can. You are not the only one who likes to eat.
Don't be ridiculous.
I'm hungry. I want something to eat. Now.
You surely don't expect me to wait on you.
No. But I do want to eat.
Very well, then. Get up and get it yourself.
Hugo does and picks up a knife, and he's going to stab Valerie in front of an entire party of people. And then he makes him put it down and apologize. And then everyone's just like, "That's awesome." And I was like, what is this disturbing entertainment everybody loves?
Oh my God, thank you. Yeah, because the aunt, I have that in my notes too. I love because it's like Marianne's aunt, who's that's the thing we find out Valerie.
Yes.
Like Marianne's beautiful, but she's also comes a very well-heeled family. They're very moneyed. But her aunt, who I love because she's like, "Oh, Auntie, you've had 4 drinks already." She's like, "That's not true. I've had 5."
Yes.
And I was like, I actually have in my notes, I love the aunt. She rules. But
She's great.
but yeah, he does this thing. He almost gets stabbed in the thigh, like in his femoral artery by Hugo.
Yes.
And then everybody's clapping, and it's like, "Oh, that was marvelous." And it's like, what?
Yeah, and imagine telling that story to someone. You're like, "This ventriloquist is over, and he really likes ham, and then his doll was going to stab him." You're like, "What are you talking about?" And we all clapped. We all loved it. Every single one of us.
The ham looked like thick triangles.
Yeah.
I was almost like, that looks like a tea sandwich or something. Like, poor Hugo. Also, dolls wielding, I have a weird trigger. Manic, like, ventriloquist dolls, especially wielding knives, is a comedy trigger for me.
Nice.
I think it stems from there's a Johnny Legend film called Teenage Cruisers that's technically an adult film, but it's like a bizarro cult film with a rockabilly soundtrack. And Billy Zoom, who'd go on to be one of the founders of X, like he's a rockabilly guy. Like this
Wow.
is like
Okay.
mid 70s. So this is good rock. This is like good retro rockabilly,
Mhm.
not like any false claims to the devil doll throne. That's all we're gonna say on that. But there's a scene where these guys are cruising because it's kind of set in the 50s, and they look over and there's this like pretty girl, and they smile at her, and she just looks over at them, and this doll lifts up his head like he's like he had been maybe going downtown
Oh, wow.
on her, and he lifts up and then he like pulls out a switchblade.
What?
And the guys drive away. And this film is full of stuff like that.
Okay, I have to
such
see
a
this.
it's a great cult film.
Okay,
It's
what
a
was
really
it?
great cult film.
What's the title
And Johnny
again?
Legend, Teenage Cruisers. It's
Teenage
also
Cruisers.
called Young, Hot, and Nasty.
Oh, okay.
Teenage Cruisers.
Sold.
But it's just Teenage Cruisers, and it's I hate the full title of it because it's honestly it's far less prurient and more just complete countercultural dada.
Yeah.
It's amazing. There's a great grumpy old man named Rudy who just says things like "drop dead." Like I love
Nice.
cranky characters.
Yes.
That's why I love Valeri. Like
Yeah.
I feel like even if he didn't actually do this in the film, I feel like there are parts where he just looks at Hugo and goes, "I hate you."
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Most of the time. The thing that brings me great joy is that the next thing that we see in the film is tiny shoes moving along the floor. We see sleeping Mark. The door handle turns, and it's Hugo who says, "Help me, find me, Berlin, 1948," and then just shuts the door and leaves. And I just like, it's so good. And then the next day, Mark says, "That dummy talked to me last night, came to my room," and you're like, "What? Oh, all right."
That dummy talked to me last night. He came to my room.
He came to your room, the dummy?
That's right.
And what did he say to you, Mark?
I know this is going to sound crazy, but he asked for help. He mentioned Berlin. Berlin, 1948.
It's so good. So then he's trying to figure out what's going on here. And then we see Valeri perform again, and this time with a woman who's a cellist. So you think, oh, he's going to have her perform the cello. And he's like, you're a stripper now. And then she strips all her clothes off on stage in a full number where there's lots of butt shots. These are the parts where I was just like, whoa, I didn't know that this movie could, okay. And she even gets topless in it. And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that. This movie is constantly surprising.
In a few moments, you will be hearing a record. When you hear the music begin, you will become a striptease artist, and you will dance for us.
I believe it was if I'm correct, the European version of it. There is a version where it doesn't have the actual nudity.
Oh, wow.
And if you go on Tubi, that's the version. You get the censored version on Tubi. Though the one on Tubi, you still get like almost boobs
Oh,
with Magda.
YouTube has it full on, so.
Oh, well, there you go. Guys, go to YouTube.
Yeah, that's how I found it, and I was just like, I'll watch this one. I didn't realize there was another cut, but I mean, that makes total sense.
You got the fuller cut though, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but it's just proof of Valeri's like his madness, but also he's such a weirdly pervy.
Yes.
Like, because he basically kind of, I mean, there's no kind of this is done as tastefully as something like this can be, but I mean, it's implied he rapes.
Yes. He's like,
Marion.
you won't remember this tomorrow, is what he says to her as he's pawing at her back. And I was like, yeesh, okay.
Yeah. And she's trying, and the thing that makes it even more kind of messed up is later on in the film, we find out part of like his process with, not to spoiler a film that is older than pretty much both of us, and probably all of the listeners or most of them, is he was able to put the soul of a man inside a doll.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that process is you traumatize somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And his process of starting to do this with Marianne is she was traumatized that night. Well, she was traumatized that because he raped her, but it's
Yeah.
like, good Lord, dude, like what the, you
Yeah.
know, like how bad was it if she's, you know, subconsciously traumatized? I mean, like rape itself is traumatic enough, but it's like, good Lord.
Yeah.
And there's so much, like we've realized late in the game that beard is fake.
Mm-hmm.
And they had that detail in,
Yeah.
which I thought was actually kind of cool.
Yeah, because I didn't realize it at first either. And then I was like, wait a second. And then, yeah, it's really, really interesting. And then Marianne's now in a coma, basically. And so you're just like, oh, this Valeri guy, I don't know about this. He now has a lady doll. And you're like, uh-oh, that can't be good. Because the lady doll does not look that unlike Hugo. It just has longer
It's
hair.
Hugo in a wig and a little bit of rouge.
Yes.
That is, I don't know if Valeri's making the dolls, but his doll maker's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, and not that mannequins, but ventriloquist dolls aren't known for their great looks.
Mm-hmm.
Most people find them fairly unsettling, I would think.
Yeah.
But these are really unsettling because Hugo's mouth, you know, doesn't have the traditional like
Yeah.
lines. So his mouth, he's always like gritting his teeth a little.
It's like his upper lip moves more. It's really odd. Mark goes to Berlin, meets up with this other guy who's like, Valeri believes you can separate the soul from the body, and he was kicked out of the medical society. I didn't look into why, but he was, and I just love that. I was like, yeah, that's not pertinent. We wouldn't need that information at all. Not helpful.
What about the Vaudeville Act? In December 47, he was kicked out of the medical society. I haven't had a chance to check up on the reasons yet, but anyway, he was kicked out.
We learn that Valeri is the master of Hugo. We get an awesome sequence where Hugo's soul's transferred from his body into the doll, and we even interview people that worked with Valeri back in the day about this whole traumatizing part with Hugo and the stabbing. We get a guy who was a cleaner who comes in as just some more backstory. It's really fantastic.
Well, there isn't much I can say. I was a cleaner at the time. I was not even on the stage when it happened. I was in Borelli's room. Everybody was out, so I could clean up the room.
We learn that Valeri is going to kill Marianne, move her body into the doll. They're going to move to Spain. It's a whole situation. And then we get the most abrupt kind of ending sequence where, like, both of these films, not long, but
Yeah.
I just wasn't ready for... I kept looking and being like, there's not much time left of this movie, but I know it wraps up at some point. And that night, Valeri puts Marianne to sleep, carries her doll to Hugo. Then he says, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and unlocks the door. There's a knock at the door, and it's his new assistant. And then that gives Hugo enough time to get out and just curb stomps a female doll, just obliterates its skull.
With this little doll foot.
With this tiny doll foot.
I loved that. So I think more things should have doll feet.
Yeah.
Curb stomping.
Yeah.
Things in general. It was bad. I know. It went from like 80 to like 200.
Yes.
Really quick.
And then they struggle in a very 60s psychedelic, frenetic, like choking in chairs. And then the doll's back in the cage. And then we hear the voices as Mark enters. And Hugo is Valeri, and Valeri is now Hugo. Their bodies have swapped. And then we're just going to end the movie. Just...
Don't be alarmed, Mr. English. Vorelli is now in the wooden doll. I am his master. The tables are turned. You need have no fear for Marianne. She is sleeping peacefully. When I wake her, she will be her normal self.
Mr. English, get me out of here. I am the great Borelli. He can't do this to me. Please, Mr. English, don't let him do it. I'll do anything you say. Get me out of here. I'll do anything you say. Please, I am the great Borelli.
It's like, what? Oh my gosh.
I know. Well, and especially because, like, all of a sudden Hugo voiced it. I mean, he almost sounded Italian.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, Hugo, the dancer, we're led to believe is German. That was, I don't know. It was there was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
It reminded me very much of like a Twilight Zone or Outer Limits
Yeah, like
kind of ending, like very like, which is not a bad thing, but no, I did like that Mark, because you're right, Mark is kind of like, as a hero, I mean, he's not a rapist, so he's more likable than Valeri,
but he does really force himself on Marianne. They show twice of her trying to push his hand off her thigh in the car before just giving in, like, to his advances. It's like, ugh, Mark.
I know. Yeah, also Mark's the guy that thinks foreplay is like penetration.
Yeah.
Like, he is way too pushy. And Valeri, like, it's weird because this isn't very enlightened of me, but I put that he's a vilf, because he's a villain, but he's so right. He's
I thought it was
like
ventriloquists that you'd like to fuck, but you're saying villains.
Oh my god, yes, that too. We have. Oh my gosh, you're welcome, world. You've heard it here first on this podcast.
Vilfs, there you go.
Yeah, a vilf. But I mean, he has such a great look to him. Like, I mean, as much as I'm being kind of funny about the vilf stuff, like, he's got a great presence to him.
Agreed.
And very like, it's not hammy, but it's so like a full bodied, like, if he's like a cognac, he's like an old cognac or something. Like, he's like that cognac that Melita was trying to give in the other Devil movie. I love it, but also, what is the implications with the doll? Because eventually the human owner is going to die.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a sequel to this. That's what the Peter Murphy one could be, is just a sequel where the
devil dolls.
He gets Valeri as the doll.
Devil dolls,
With a Z?
plural. He's got multiple dolls.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm down. I am down
Same.
for that.
Let's crowdfund it.
Oh my god, we'll have Ogre in it.
Yes.
Somewhere in there.
He could be the who would Ogre be? He wouldn't be the Mark character.
He could be Hugo.
Yes. Oh my god, Peter Murphy is Valeri and Ogre is Hugo? I mean,
Right?
with Devil Doll soundtrack? Goodness.
Yes, take our money. Just take our money right now.
Oh my gosh. See, this is the problem. People that have money want to make things that are like, you know, I don't know, the Fast and the Furious or something, but like, make this. This would be incredible.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, and especially like, even like, because like some of the genre stuff that gets promoted, like, I won't mention by names, but I keep seeing a trailer for something that just looks like a POV, like Friday the 13th kind of ripoff, but without the fun campers and booty shorts. And it's like, I mean, it just seems sort of like there's no magic. There's no, maybe it's good. I don't want to be, because I always complain about people that shit on stuff without giving it a fair chance.
Sure.
In the spirit of fairness, but you know, have fun.
Yes.
Be influenced, do your research, but have fun with something and make something, take the past and create something new. Because that's what Mario Pansera did with Double Doll. It's like you take all of these influences and use it to sort of create your own patchwork quilt. And you could do that. You could do that with both of these movies, because both of them have so many interesting elements, weird elements. I love how just unashamedly weird both films are. And especially because like with the 60s Devil Doll, the 1964 one, the thing I kind of like about with Mark is like, he quickly, once he realizes nobody's going to believe him, there's no drama. He's at a bar. He's at a bar just like doing shots, and he's just like, what can I do? And I'm like, but that's kind of like realistic, because it's like, I mean, what would you do when you realize you're really the only person that knows the true craziness that's going on, but it's so out of the box. And that nobody's going to have your back on that. Nobody's going to believe you. And just like, God, how frustrating. Like, what I mean, you know, it's but that's kind of cool. I love that it brings those kind of like questions to mind.
It's funny because we kick off this season talking about the movie Amphibian Man, which is like a science fiction, like romance film from the 60s. And in that, a guy has given his son shark gills so he can live under the water because he had a lung issue. They don't really get much into it. It's great. Wonderful movie. But his like sort of confidant is a journalist he's like, you can't tell anybody. So it's much like Mark in this, where he's just like, I can't do my job, so who's gonna believe about this shark boy or whatever? And in this, he's just like, yeah, I know all of it. Like even at the end, he witnesses these bodies have just swapped, and now what's he gonna do with that? Like Hugo is now Valeri. Like Mark's just like, this is the world's best story, but no one's gonna buy it. So I guess that's it. I don't know. Like, does Marianne live? We don't know what happens. Like, did she die when the doll got its head exploded? Like, we don't know. There's a crazy sound that happens, but it doesn't really tell us what's happening. And that's another thing I love about it, is that it's not just like, and then this is solved up, and this is wrapped up, and there you go. It's like it ends, and you just go, whoa. I need to like decompress and probably rewatch that, because what did I just witness? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And also we get enough of the backstory of Valeri, but not a ton. But he is such an interesting character, because it's like when Magda gets jealous and you find out that she's like, I supported you when you had nothing. And he's obviously like gonna spurn her.
Right.
But he's even too much of a coward to do his own dirty work.
Yeah, he makes
basically
Hugo do it. He's like, Hugo, she said you're ugly. And then Hugo's like, oh, stab her.
Which is a very extreme, such an extreme reaction to be like, oh, this film is so crazy. Like, and I just love the way Bryant says lines like that, where he's like, she said you're ugly.
Yes.
You know, like, and it's like, and then the fact that the doll is so sensitive.
Yeah. Hugo's like, what? I'm going to go over there and stab her. She's clearly sleeping nude, too, under a sheet that's barely covering her nipples.
We got so much side boob.
Yeah, it's...
even more side boob than the cotton doll.
True.
Like, yeah. So if you love side boobs and...
this episode's brought to you by side boobs.
And handsome and hateful ventriloquists. This is your movie.
Yes. You should write a note to leave to somebody that says... I think you're attractive, and if you like hateful ventriloquists and side boob, then come to this Subway restaurant.
Oh my God, that at least would have been. I still wouldn't have gone, because I'm like, either way, I'm probably going to end up murdered if I go. Yeah. But also, it's not a way to anybody listening. Don't try to court anybody like that. Really? Certainly don't use a promise of gainful employment or a 6-inch sub. Okay.
What if you'd arrived and they'd been like, this Subway's been closed for centuries? Like...
oh my, that's century. It's literally a cave. Like,
just caveman drawings of Subway sandwiches.
That's a meatball marinara.
Yeah, oh my goodness. We've discovered it. Oh my gosh. Any final thoughts for Devil Doll 1964?
What a fun ride.
Yeah.
What a fun, entertaining, and beautifully shot.
Yes.
Really, really well shot. Great audio design. I'm so glad you and I both obviously geeked out on that, because that's another, like, I feel element that a lot of people don't think about sometimes with film. Like it's like sounds kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
So when you see those films that actually go the extra thought and really think about, ooh, what can we do with this design of it? And really, go that full multimedia route. I love it. It's such a sweet spot. I think it's a great, obviously very easy to find.
Yes.
So I would recommend people checking it out.
I couldn't find a Blu-ray of it, so hopefully somebody will put it out. Chances are, the fact I spend money on it, some import or something I'll come across, then Vinegar Syndrome will put it out or something. But it would be great. I mean, just seeing Hugo's face on the front, or Valeri with Hugo, it's just... I would love I'd love a poster. It's that kind of image that just like sticks in my brain. And every time it shows a close up of Hugo and his weird ear, like how his ear is connected to his face, it's just like,
yes,
I don't like it. And then I can't look away. It's just it's a fascinating film.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's oh my God, they could have like Hugo masks.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we live in an era where we've gotten little dolls of the sinful dwarf.
Yeah.
Let's do some Hugo devil doll masks.
Oh my gosh. You push a button and he's like, I want to eat. I want some wine. Find me in Berlin, 1948. Oh my gosh. Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining me on this episode that's got so much Devil Doll love.
Rightfully so.
Mhm.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you love the band. I hope everybody listening checks out the band and checks out both of these movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me over, of course, on my website, mondoheather.com, but you can also go to my linktree.com/mondoheather. That's all lowercase together. And there you'll find links to my website, to my Patreon, my social media, various articles, and other podcast appearances I have done. Please check that out if the spirit so moves you.
And it will. And we'll leave with one last piece from the ever so awesome band Devil Doll. As always, I'm Dirk Marshall, and this has been VH Us. Don't go yet. We're closing out this episode with a track off their album All Beauty Destroyed. Here is The Devil's in the Details by Aesthetic Perfection.
Just swallow what you don't. Life's not worth living.